Go then. Okay, we are live and we will call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. McLean, may I have a roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Dean?
Here.
Mrs. Egan? I'm message from Mary today. I heard perfectly at home.
Yeah.
Those are just a hard one.
We're working on it.
Is it my attendance that's leaking this out?
Not at all. All right, are we good? Talk.
Check. Check.
Okay, Elizabeth, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
I don't mind the echo, it's just the
I
overwhelming.
think we're probably close enough.
Are we close enough? Okay. Hello, friends. We're back. Sorry about that. Let's pick up where we left off, which I think was at item 2, approval of the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Are there any questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The motion carries. Item 3 is citizens' request to address the board. Under item 3, you are given 2 opportunities to address the board. Under item 3.1, you can request to address the board on any topic that's on tonight's agenda. And under item 9, you are welcome to address the board on any topic. When making comments, please state your name and direct your comments to Mrs. Kelly Horst, President, Clarkston Board of Education. So friends, tonight we have a particular item that I think is probably of great interest to most of you. And so if you are here tonight and wish to address the board on what falls under item 5.1, the Return to School 2020 Plan Update, this would encompass the recommendation that Dr. Ryan is making to return to face-to-face instruction. If that is what you wish to address the board on tonight, there is no need to indicate your interest now. I'm just going to ask you to queue up when we get to item 5.1. I think that is probably where most of my interest will lie. I know some of you were on the phone tonight, so if you remember what our procedure is there, if you were here via Zoom on the link, you click on the participants button, you click on the raise hand button. If you were here on the phone, you click on *9. Do not do that yet. If what you want to speak to us about is the proposal to return to face-to-face instruction, please wait until we start speaking at item 5.1. If you wish to address the board on any other topic that's on tonight's agenda, and you can see the agenda in front of you, the financial analysis, personnel changes, the amended calendar, the assessment tool, the extended learning plan, our financial report, if you are interested in addressing the board on any of those topics, now I need you to indicate your interest. So we can make a note of your name, and I can do my job right this time, which I did not do last time, and be sure to call on you when we get to that agenda item. So I'm going to give you a moment if you wish to address us on any other topic other than 5.1. And now I have to figure out how to look.
No one currently.
Okay, can you tell me that, Mr. Hare, because my little Zoom thing moved to the other side and I can't figure out how to make it bigger. Are you watching it too? Thank you so much. I'm afraid if I hit something, it's going to close, and I don't want to do that. Okay, can you unmute her, please? Okay. Rebecca, can you hear me?
Rebecca, you just need to unmute yourself and we can hear you.
Rebecca, hello? Okay, Rebecca, if you'll unmute yourself, then you can let us know which agenda item you wish to address the board on.
Okay, Rebecca, we're gonna go ahead and lower your hand. If you still want to address the board on something, just raise it again and we'll try to get you unmuted.
Okay, was there someone else, Mr. Heyer? Okay. Okay, then we'll continue on, and then, as I said, when we get to 5.1, if that's the topic on which you would wish to address the board, just go ahead and start lining up, and I'll let you know when it's time to start hearing public comment on that item. Item 4 is superintendent update. Dr. Ryan.
Thank you, President Morse. In a brief update, I want to look at the big picture of the work that's been done by our Clarkston staff, by our families, and most importantly, by our students so far this year. As you saw, and I'm sure heard, the struggles even to get this meeting off the ground. I can tell you that countless hours and amount of investment that our staff has put in to making this distance learning format work. And I've been consistently and completely impressed by the way they have grown and were able to invest from our experiences in the spring to really take it to another level so far this school year. I've seen it with my own children at home. I've seen it in comments and testimonials by our families, and I've seen it walking by classrooms, the amount of effort that everybody's putting in right now. And I've been greatly impressed, and I can't say enough about the grit, the ability to take on adversity, the ability to take on something new and be successful at it, especially when it doesn't work, when you take it out of the box, not getting frustrated, but keep on pushing. And to me, by all accounts, I would report to our board, although it's not perfect, but it's getting better every day. Our distance learning format this year, I feel, is well under our belt. And I have nothing but admiration and thanks to say to our teachers, to our support staff, to our families, and most important, to all the kids out there. The students of Clarkston have shown their own grit and their own ability to kind of take it to another level, and I appreciate every minute that they've invested to make this work. And I confidently think throughout the school year, no matter what learning format that we're in, if there's ever an opportunity or a chance that we may return to a distance learning format, or if we stay in a distance learning format, I have complete confidence that we're going to continue to make it successful and something we can be proud of. I also want to not lose the chance to not only look at what we're doing in the present, but I've been so impressed. I think it's a game changer moving into the future. I think more and more students may elect to choose to pursue a distance learning format, and I think it really changes the name of education when it comes to things like weather and all the other challenges that we face in education, whether it be heat, cold, rain of night, all the different things that traditionally challenge us. This adds a whole nother area of flexibility to our program, and possibly even throughout the year having opportunities to do things a little different that we never have done before. And my commitment in this update to as your superintendent is that I don't plan to lose anything that we learned as part of this format, and that we want to continue to enhance it. And as I said, I think it's going to be a game changer in education as a whole as we push forward. So nothing but admiration for our teachers in Clarkston, for our students and our families. Please keep up the good work as we continue to take on new challenges, new formats, and as we get through this pandemic together as a community, I know that we're going to continue to do it and do it well together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Item 5.1, presentation items, is the Return to School 2020 Plan Update. And so before I turn this over to Dr. Ryan, I would like to remind the board and the public of the key issues that frame this presentation and discussion. Hopefully this will help keep us as a board in the right lane as we ask questions and prepare to vote later this evening. I hope also it will help our public understand that we are not addressing operational concerns right now, but the larger issues of safety, continuity, and readiness. We are bound by the Governor's Return to School Roadmap, which outlines the safety protocols districts must follow when students return to school for in-person instruction. Some protocols are required, others are designated as strongly recommended or recommended, all based on the phase of the state's reopening, and we are currently in phase 4. Clarkston's extended learning plan, which we are required by law to submit to our ISD, and under which this recommendation falls, is in compliance with the Return to School Roadmap. When we met August 10th and Dr. Ryan asked the board to consider delaying the return to face-to-face instruction, he cited two big issues: a lack of clarity on public health indicators regarding COVID-19 and the state of the virus in our community, and a lack of confidence in maintaining continuity of learning, given the lack of direction from the Oakland County Health Department at that time. The board asked Dr. Ryan to provide and track a list of metrics by which the district would return to face-to-face instruction, which he has done in cooperation with the Oakland County Health Department and his colleagues throughout Oakland County. That's the update and recommendation he has to share with us tonight. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ryan.
Thank you, President Horst. And in looking at our slideshow tonight, hopefully members of our community can follow along at home as I've tried to capture as succinctly as possible the update that I have for you in a way that shows not only the train of thinking that we've been following since really March through the summer till present, but also our thinking that's moving forward. This isn't a one-and-done recommendation tonight. I'd like our community to view this as a point-in-time analysis and one that we will continue to provide for the remainder of this school year until this pandemic ends. But when I say, as you look at the mission-driven decision-making that we've engaged in as an administrative team and as a school district, this very much was stepped up this summer when our administrative team and volunteers that joined task force across this district to look at ways that we could be having different forms of learning as we went into the school year. We tried to examine from a 360 perspective of looking at all the different challenges that we'd face, both as in-person and potentially in distance or even hybrid formats. A tremendous amount of effort and work went into beginning to map these different formats as we progressed towards the school year. And at the same time, I think we had a certain set of confidence in our public health and our governmental agencies to support Clarkston schools and all school districts as we progress to the start of the school year. And as President Horst eloquently put, we had a lot of challenges back in August. And although I think that as a school district, we rose to those challenges to make sure that our formats were set and our protocols were in line, I felt at the time in August that there was a general failure of our support in terms of county public health and in direction from the state. Obviously, even this evening, our entire community and our education system and back to school is resting on the decision of our local school board and advisement by our superintendent to guide our school district. Obviously, that's not the best place looking at a systemic or statewide school systems we'd rather be. But in Clarkston, we always take the bull by the horns. And if I wasn't comfortable, as I was not in August, of having wholesale or universal face-to-face learning, that I would create systems and create relationships and make it so that we could continue to evaluate what that potential would be at any point in the year to change our learning format. And I think the work tonight represents what we were able to share with you, and this plan has been ongoing. And it very much represents the Michigan Safe Schools Roadmap and all the advisement and support from our local health department to get us to this point this evening. If you look at our return to school planning, as I mentioned, this is a continuous process for now, for the present, and for the future throughout the school year. And it has been done in collaboration with the Oakland County Health Department. And I have to say, for all the challenges, and I've said at the last several meetings that we faced at the beginning of the school year, they've been absolutely incredible on a number of fronts. Not only with the epidemiologists at the county, but the county nurses that have been assigned to our school district to support a potential re-entry and management during the COVID crisis. And they've gone great leaps not only to inform us and keep us abreast of how to interpret the data of COVID and how to work through and look at what format we'd be as a learning organization, but they've done to great lengths to communicate and educate us as superintendents on how we can interpret and make good decisions and recommendations for our community. I've been very fortunate to be able to work with a group of superintendents in North Oakland County on a weekly basis. There's been a coalition, we call ourselves the North End, which includes Clarkston in the center, and I was able to get commitments and cooperation from the Brandon School District, Lake Orion, Waterford, Holly, and Oxford school districts. We meet as a weekly collective with the Oakland County Health Department to review over our data and look in the big picture of advisements for each of our communities. Each of our communities are different, and they need to be taken that way in terms of their recommendations moving forward. And looking at the support that we receive from the health department, I can share with you a little glimpse of the thinking that goes behind creating a medical or epidemiological recommendation for our learning format. This is very much a public health question, as much or more than an education question. And in working with our colleagues at the health department, we've been studying what we call the overlapping and concentric metrics of being able to follow the COVID infection and also being able to make educational decisions around that. As Dr. Fauci has said several times in his advisement in looking at the bigger picture of opening schools, or if they should remain in a distance format, that you need to start at home. Start with your local community. You need to look at the data in your local community with the support of your health department. And then you start to build concentric rings, they call it, of data around your community, starting with the school districts and zip codes that surround the Clarkston area, and then the county as a whole, and the state as a whole. Each of these levels of concentric rings provides insights on the direction of the COVID pandemic, and it also helps provide indicators of not only the current safety and stability, but also the long-term prognosis as we progress forward. We don't want to overreact or underreact, but we're really using the areas of confirmed cases per million per day, and per 10,000 within our county and local area, and studying with the health department our 14-day local averages, and also looking at the number of individuals that have been hospitalized, our percent positivity, our healthcare capacity, our testing and tracing and containment infrastructure, including also internal reviews of our Tier 1 reopenings, and that comparative analysis of districts that are already employing face-to-face instruction. It's a very broad array of data indicators, and although I do have a doctorate in education, it's very much a broader expertise of epidemiologists, and looking at their expertise to be able to interpret this information. I would very highly be suspicious of any superintendents or local government officials that take metrics or prescribe metrics or post metrics in this infection because they learned about it on TV, they read about it on the internet, or they've read a book about it. In an era that we need absolute expertise in this advisement and interpretation, I've heavily relied on the health department and their epidemiologists to take all of these data indicators and be able to look at those concentric rings to help support a recommendation for Clarkston. And that's monitored multiple times per week. Every Tuesday afternoon and every Thursday afternoon, for a portion of the afternoon, I sit and work with the epidemiologists at the county and my colleagues superintendents to study and follow and trace the path of where we are with respect to COVID. And that's kind of the basis of my recommendations for this evening. If you look at the countywide cases, and again, it's a microcosm of two concentric rings outside the local data that I referred to, you see that over the last month, and more than a month, that the overall rates in number of infections as reported by the health department and the relationship to us, along with the other data indicators, support that currently that we're experiencing a relatively low level of COVID spread within our county. That is not a zero spread, and it can't be confused with a zero spread. But we have a very flat, low curve when it comes to Oakland County as a whole, and that in some respects it's even been on a general decreasing path within our county, which is important information over time. As people might have a perception that COVID either jumps or is wildly unpredictable, in fact, what our public health officials are finding and what they're advising to me is that it can be tracked over time and that you can be able to extrapolate lines and look at the overall stability of what is going on and make decisions from that information. If we go down a little more granular to the Clarkston area specifically, and this is fairly representative of the school districts around us as well in North Oakland County, what you see in terms of not only the cases per 10,000, but the current case numbers. If you follow the line from August through mid-September to the present, there's been not only a stability in it, but a decreasing trend in both these areas. This is very compelling to my partners at the Oakland County Health Department, and epidemiologically, the advisement is that pursuing an overall face-to-face instruction that's done within the protocols and supports that have been outlined that we presented in our version of the back-to-school roadmap is advisable overall right now. And the colleagues, again, support the notion that this can change over time and needs to be monitored week by week. But they're anticipating for the next month to 2 months that this curve would stay at this level. And if it starts to increase, we'd be monitoring this curve from week to week to be well ahead of it for our families and school district. Our goal is not to advise the school board this evening along our plans to bring students back face to face and then either decide it and be done with it, or think that we're going to immediately rush back to a distance learning format. Our community and staff needs to understand that these numbers change over time and they need to be followed over time. And that updates will be presented to if our board elects to send us back face-to-face or not, will still be presented from week to week and also at every school board meeting to show the trend of the infection. And if the rate of COVID dramatically or begins to increase, that will be very clear and publicly stated by our school district and our health department in preparation that our families can know that we might be leaving a safe harbor and heading into more uncharted or waters that we have to react to move potentially back to a distance format. All of this information happens in the span of weeks, not days. And our reaction to the COVID pandemic will be in a span of weeks and over months and not in days. But it's important to understand that this is an ongoing process and that although the numbers are supporting us right now, they could change over time in a negative way, and we need to be collectively prepared for that. The next slide I have kind of shows kind of a snapshot of some of the weekly data that we've been looking at with the health department. They've been kind enough to help support us right down to the level of documenting individual school districts over time in Oakland County. And I invite the public. The website is actually listed on the slide itself and can be found at the Oakland County Health Division website, where at home, students, families, and staff can follow the overall trends of the infection in a very color-coded pattern by zip code and by school district to monitor it along with us. Now, understandably, this is on a very small range of information that this color-coded system is presented on the website, and that we will continue to look at the other 9 indicators along with the health department to be able to monitor the spread of COVID and its state in the Clarkston area and surrounding areas as well. In addition to the quantitative analysis that we've been completing with the health department, there's also a qualitative evaluation on the educational side for the impact of COVID. And within that group, as I mentioned in the north end, our Oakland County superintendents, 2 of our school districts, Brandon and Oxford, already started this year. And their advisement and dialogue with us as other superintendents in the north area has been huge in terms of our understanding of their response and their protocols and what kind of effect they've had within their schools, both educationally and looking at the potential spread of the virus within their campuses. Additionally, obviously, if you're looking at a more comprehensive nature, our health department is not relying just on 2 school districts and their experiences to advise us. They're looking at Southeast Michigan as a whole and receiving data in a broader set from across the United States to help us better understand what the relationship between students being in school and COVID. As you recall back in August when I spoke to the school board in our community, one of the large question marks in my mind as your superintendent is I wanted to see what happened when school districts went back relative to their rates of COVID in their communities and how the impact on school was, both in terms of the spread of the potential infection, the safety aspects of it, and obviously the continuity of school, keeping schools open aspect. I was not willing to recommend at the time in August that we were willing to experiment, as I called it. I believe it's quoting myself, that we were willing to experiment with our community schools to see what would happen. Instead, I was very strongly in favor of a slow start within that tiered approach while we were able to look at the effects on other schools. And tonight I have information that I did not have in August that I can share with our community, our staff, and our families. That when we looked at school districts that successfully followed the protocols, the ones that we're going to be recommending as part of our toolkits for staff and for families, And we took precautions that had natural deviations, and I define natural deviations as those ones that occur in classrooms across any school district. When you have mask wearing and you have social distancing, you're dealing with children. And children, sometimes they're going to mix in ways that are unpredictable. And that, to me, had to be accounted for. I needed to see what happened in school districts that I considered where natural deviations occurred and what the effects were on both the operational effectiveness and safety of the schools. And what we found in general, and what has been shown to me in case study after case study with our public health officials, is that schools are a safe place overall to be. And that both in our county and our area and in Southeast Michigan, and that data that has supported across the United States, is that when students are deemed or found positive, in most cases, and in the ones in Oakland County especially, to an individual person, that the individuals became infected outside the schools, in other social circumstances, and were identified as part of the coming to school process, and that in times where not only the contact tracing was employed, but there was also utilization of quarantining, that the infection was not spreading in schools, that students brought it to school and then were quarantined from there. That's huge. You know, looking at data from across the country and seeing that the precautions of mask wearing and social distancing, along with the other protocols of cleaning and everything else, can effectively be utilized in schools. And the early data that we're getting, and the data that we're getting in Oakland County in terms of contact tracing, supports that. Because our county protocols, and when they do contact tracing, can literally determine a positive case back to their origin of what social gathering that it occurred in. And to be honest with you, over the last couple weeks, the report from the health department has said that in the late summer, midsummer, that graduation parties were the #1 spreader in the Clarkston and the surrounding area where they had positive cases. And that obviously, because that graduation season is closed, right now, majority of the cases are attached to larger social gatherings, and the #1 culprit is weddings, fall weddings. So to show you kind of how precise that the tracking is, and how that will continue to be to show if there's actually a spread or transmission within our schools. Obviously, we're going to look at it no matter what, but the data indicators suggest that it's not happening and spreading within schools, but coming to schools and then being dealt with. Secondly, related to that is the attendance and the disruption of schools related to COVID. There has been closures. There has been schools that have taken backward steps with relationship to COVID. But looking at the data and the virus progression within our area, looking at the protocols and looking at schools in our area and their effectiveness of staying open, I believe that we have met that 90% or greater. The superintendents that are leading these school districts have shared with me in great detail their experiences, and they are staying open right now. They are not experiencing major disruptions to school, and it's not just because of the virus itself, but because of contact tracing and protocols that involve quarantining. That is other good information that I can share with our community and board. So all that, with respect to that comparative analysis, I feel like we have information and data that we did not have before. It's something I believe needs to be continued to be followed, but overall I believe it had positive reflection in support of attending and progression towards more tiers and a greater emphasis towards face-to-face learning. If you look internally, another area of our qualitative and quantitative evaluation has been our own tier opening and reopening in Clarkston. As I gave updates at our last board meeting, we have been working, our early childhood center that is actually attached to this physical site at our board office has been open. We have been meeting with students selectively according to their IEP services. We've continued to do meal distributions. We've had our staff in buildings and working together. And we've been supporting, where possible, our extracurricular clubs, and also the marching band and athletics have all been in session. And so far, we have no known COVID cases in any of the Tier 1 programs. We had suspicions, we had testing, but as far as confirmed cases right now, we've been operating these programs since the first day of school. We've had 0 cases documented that have been transmitted, and none as far as obviously then transmitted within school. This has these experiences within Tier 1, not only being positive for the quantitative metrics, has also provided us with an opportunity to learn more about what protocols look like and how the cleaning can go in a very live situation. Our administrators and our team overall has evaluated these on several different areas in terms of being able to support a larger face-to-face. And like anything, I believe it's important to start small and build capacity over time, do it well in a small way, continue to do it well, and build on to those successes, or find an appropriate time to hit pause and be able to back up to figure out where those protocols need to be improved. But so far, based obviously on that quantitative results of it not spreading or transmitting with the schools with our Tier 1, it does support, again, moving on towards a Tier 2 and beyond in terms of face-to-face opportunities. And I think as related to this, in those weekly meetings with our Oakland County Health Department, they've led not only the discussions and the analysis of the neighboring school districts and beyond, but they've also been available to help us evaluate our internal workings of our Tier 1 programs, and their feedback has been very strong so far in terms of our ability to carry this out. They've been impressed, and they feel like that we're in a state ready to expand from our Tier 1 to move forward as well. And that was very supportive up to this past week and weekend in conversations with members of the health department. But I have to tell you, the one part that still resonates in my mind, and it has to do with the collective effort of what we have to do if we do get the recommendation to move face-to-face, if we want to stay face-to-face. Right now, the data supports strongly that schools are not the culprit in spreading COVID right now if protocols are maintained. At issue, though, is that this can only be done in a safe way if the overall rates of the virus activity in our area remain low. And honestly, and to our community and everybody viewing tonight, that can only be maintained by the cooperation of every individual in this community. I had a great conversation with Mr. Kittle, our Independence Township Supervisor, in looking at what we can do to support Independence and then also Springfield Townships and the affiliated townships associated with Clarkston Schools to help on an information campaign that lets our citizens know that their behavior, their actions, and their decision-making will directly impact our ability to hold school face-to-face. I believe that having face-to-face school, not only educationally, but for our community, for our families who work, and all the struggles that entail of having the benefits of it, will only be maintained if our community can be responsible and make good decisions related to keeping all of us safe. And when I drive through Clarkston on the weekends and I see large barbecues with many individuals attending, when I know there's still large weddings and other type of events, and when I look and see in downtown Clarkston, large groupings of people around, it doesn't make me feel judgmental or negative. It makes me concerned from the area that we need to act as a community if we want to keep COVID low and keep our kids in school. I needed to put this as a collective effort, and knowing that communities who bind together and work together to try to keep the students in school are more likely to be able to maintain that. And that includes those safe social interactions, mask wearing, social distancing, and trying to maintain in your smaller social circles. This isn't your superintendent of schools trying to advise you on how you have to behave or not hang out with anybody, but my message is be reasonable, be thoughtful, and think about what we're relying on to have even the opportunity to provide this recommendation. And knowing that if we don't collectively as a community take it seriously and take our own responsibilities as being part of a larger system that provides school and everybody else's safety, we have to understand that in the weeks and months ahead, that I will be potentially having to come back to our community based on the behavior of our community to provide different recommendations that might result in having to step backwards in terms of our ability to do face-to-face and the education that we want to provide for our community. So that is so intimately tied that I felt like it had to be in my presentation as well this evening as far as a recommendation. So, with that background, the recommendations for returning to face-to-face instruction, I'd like to be able to provide you some specific details to what that's going to look like. And I'd like to say it would be instantly flip a switch and tomorrow or in the upcoming weeks that it could be business as usual, but it's not. Nor can we take a one-size-fits-all approach to bringing our students back. Looking at our elementary schools, it's my recommendation right now because of the class structure and how it lends itself to effective cohorting and mitigation efforts and being able to not have a larger mixing of students that you'd find in a secondary building, that we have the opportunity with our low class sizes, which have never been this low. We artificially lowered our class sizes to the lowest in Clarkston history to provide as much opportunities for social distancing as possible, that it is important right now to look at bringing back all of our elementary students in early October. And I'll get to the specific dates and details of that. Now, secondary schools present other unique challenges. Those of you who might think that a school is a school is a school would be wrong. For those of you who have recently been or driven by our secondary schools, they are immense in terms of both square footage and the number of students involved. Those students involved in our secondary buildings, not only is there a large grouping in terms of total capacity of those sites, but the mixing of those students throughout the day is high. Obviously, looking at elementary, you sit in a self-contained classroom. In secondary, you move through the building, multiple classrooms a day. And even with cleaning precautions and other protocols put into effect, there's still a lot of moving parts to a secondary building. Looking at just the sheer immensity of lunches in the secondary building, the movement in classes and what students do in the hallways between classes, and what those students do while they await their students or their teachers to be able to clean and make sure their classrooms are sanitized between hours. I still have concerns as your superintendent of going to a full-bore immediate reentry of all of our secondary students. The risk profiles are simply different between elementary and secondary schools. And I want to do it right. I want to, knowing that we have one chance to make sure that all our protocols are highly refined, I believe that it's going to really allow itself to that gradual transition back in and being able to look at a hybrid format of bringing half the students back each day over a span of a week. And I'll get some details with that in terms of the weekly schedule. As far as all special education students, I know that this is a key point of interest to families that have a student that requires support services. They're going to follow the district plan as well, including students with IEPs. Special education teams are going to collaborate with families and look at, to review and adjust. We want to make it as normal and as seamless as possible for our students with IEPs, but we know that some students require more support than others, and that we need to be prepared as a district to be able to support that as they reenter school as well. To that end, and to support both our staff and families, we've developed and are already distributed and are in the process of reviewing a staff toolkit for return to school. And later this week, likely if the Board of Education approves this evening, probably within 48 hours or roundabouts, we'll be distributing a family toolkit, including protocol videos with all the pertinent information on what families will need to know re-entering school, whether it's elementary or secondary. So we do see this, again, a tiered reentry. Our hope within this, as we look at the secondary schools, is that they can as well share in having full day for everybody if we can do it right, and the COVID virus itself in terms of our community stays stable or continues to reduce, that we'll continue to have more options as we move forward. But I'm wholeheartedly in support of that continued tiered approach of making sure we do this right and that we keep safety and also the overall welfare of our students and staff at the front of our minds. Different diagram, again, looking at young fives in kindergarten. We look at even our first week beginning on October 5th as part of our reentry plan. Over that week, you see that we start with our young fives in kindergarten at the beginning of the week, and by midweek, Thursday into Friday, we have our upper L grades added into schools. We really look at that first week from 10-5 to 10-9 as being a transition week in elementary. And we look at it as a way that we can continue for the students that aren't re-entered at that point to continue on with their distance learning. As challenging as it will be, we will make that transition for students across that week, and we'll do it in a way that provides students and families an opportunity to slowly re-enter the learning environment. As I know our community staff and our board remembers that it's been since March since we've had face-to-face learning. And to expect that, again, a switch will be pulled and everything will immediately work is not reasonable, but to do it in a phased-in approach across that week of 10-5, October 5th beginning, is my recommendation to do it and do it well. Starting on October 12th, we'll start looking at the hybrid reentry for our secondary students. And during the week of the 5th, and you'll get plans this week in terms of students that will be new to that building to have opportunities to be able to interact and be able to follow their class schedules. But in earnest, on the 12th, we'll have our distance learning for our secondary students beginning, and we'll be dividing the alphabet in half based on student counts, so that half our students attend on Monday, half our students will attend on Tuesday, and in between, all students will be engaged in the learning process, whether they're in class or out. I trust in our we'll call it expertise and our experience of our teaching staff in the secondary to be able to look at students learning every day, but having half the students within their classrooms as being the format that they're going to be as their base model. On Wednesdays, all secondary students 612 will be in distance learning. They will not be in school on Wednesdays, but they will be in a regular, what had been the Wednesday wellness days, will be a full day of school on Wednesday, but it'll just be virtual. On Thursday and Friday, we're going to repeat the Monday-Tuesday schedule with half of our students, Alpha, returning on Thursday and then on Friday. Mark my words as it relates to this, learning will continue on a weekly basis. For every 5 days of a week, there will be 5 days worth of learning. I count on our teachers to be innovative and to continue to look at this format, even if it only lasts for 2 or 3 weeks as we make that transition, that we use every day as an opportunity to learn a new skill if we have to, or that we are forced to stay in a hybrid model. We take every opportunity in Clarkston to learn and to be able to maximize what we learn to influence our learning moving forward. We never know when we're going to be able to use the skills and the routines that we start now. And I believe that the hybrid approach in secondary, although I would never rely on it as a base educational model into the future as best practice, I do believe it allows our secondary schools to work through the processes that they need to do to give me the confidence to recommend to you and our community that we can do it in a safe and effective way across those buildings. And I look at our elementary programs, I strongly believe that, again, with low class sizes, cleaning protocols, our cohorting, and being able to do in a safe fashion that we can move forward in a way to educate our elementary students at this time. But as I said, this goes as far as I can monitor it and support it from literally week to week within our program as a whole. Additional preparation that will be required that I'm recommending to the Board of Education is on Wednesday, September 30th, that we have an opportunity to have office hours for teachers to be able to interact with students in the morning, and that they have opportunities based on the Board of Education approving tonight to put in action elements of the toolkit and what they need to do to prepare their classrooms, which have been in a complete virtual format, distance format, into a in-person format. They'll be able to have some time on that afternoon to rearrange desks with the support of their custodial and building staffs, and all hands on deck type mentality to prepare our schools for reopening elementary the following week and the week after that for our secondary schools. So we look at that as a support tool, and we also look on Wednesday, looking ahead of things that we're going to immediately have within our radar, that we take Wednesday, October 21st, that we have AM regular instruction and distance learning for secondary, and PM parent-teacher conference opportunities for families and for our staff to engage. As far as additional preparations for students, our young 5s and kindergarten students will have the building all to themselves, as I mentioned, on October 5th and 6th, and then that slow onboarding of the rest of their cohorts throughout that week. And I should say we'll have some modified orientations in the secondary with tours to review the protocols for all secondary schools for students new to those buildings, and those schedules and plans will be announced soon. Obviously, one step at a time, we need to make sure that our Board of Education and our community has an opportunity to sound off in terms of our recommendations tonight. But it should also be known, if there is not a positive response from our Board of Education tonight based on input from us and from our community, that the information and the preparation that we've invested in this will be used at some point. I believe in no wasted time, and that everything we've invested will pay dividends moving into the future, and that we needed this work to be completed at one point or another. We're choosing to complete it now in preparation, and obviously with the other elements of both the quantitative and qualitative analysis that we've brought to you this evening, we believe that we're in a position that we can move to the next tier for our reopening. So just to kind of make sure that we capture this, I feel like this is all part of a larger reentry plan. I think it was completely contingent on several things, including what President Horst mentioned at the beginning. Things that we did not have in August, which was support of our local health department to help us make health decisions for our community and for our schools. I think it needed time for us to get a better understanding what protocols are effective and how we could best deploy those in schools, and for us to have time to look at how our programs in tier were functioning. With that in hand, I believe that we are in a position to continue that reentry, and I do believe strongly that the elementary cohorting and protocols built around our elementary schools and that hybrid is by far the best approach that we can have right now, this evening. And I would also be prepared, I guess, at this time to take any feedback from our Board of Education's questions or clarifications, but our community and our needs to also know that they will be receiving additional operational, we'll call them, items in terms of their protocols and needs this week. That would be obviously contingent on that approval for this evening. So thank you, President Horst. Prepare for any questions you might have at this time.
Okay, so trustees, we're going to take some time now. I'm going to just go around the room and obviously to Mrs. Egan and let you offer some feedback and reflection, any questions you may have, and then we'll move on to public comment. So I realize that trustees, you and our parents may have questions about how this instruction might work, some of those operational details, how the lunch is going to work, how buses are going to run, how students are going to move around the buildings, or what happens if someone becomes ill. Please remember that our focus here right now is whether or not the conditions are favorable to warrant a return to face-to-face instruction. That is our focus as a board. Dr. Ryan mentioned it a couple of times. I'm going to reiterate it right now for all of you, but for everyone else who is listening that wishes to comment on it in a moment when we get to the public comment section here. All operational concerns will be addressed later in the week. Should we vote to pass this recommendation, they will be addressed in what I'm sure is going to be a very detailed and lengthy and informational toolkit for parents and staff. But right now, our focus is at that higher level about whether or not we believe the time is right to return to face-to-face instruction based on the climate and the conditions that Dr. Ryan has outlined. So, for members of the public who wish to address the board on this topic, now is the time to get in line virtually, so to speak, and I was seeing some hands being raised throughout the presentation. So go ahead and do that while we're having our board discussion, and we will get to you when we have had a chance to finish our debate. And so with that said, citizens, you go ahead and get in line, and I'm going to now turn it over to some of my colleagues, and I'll look to the left, and I'll start with Mr. Need.
Thank you, Mrs. Horst. I think you very well framed the issue before the board tonight, and I think it's no secret that I've spoken many times before about my concern for the mental health of our students, why I believe a return to face-to-face learning is so critical for a variety of reasons, and I won't go through those. A couple weeks ago, we met as a board and we approved, in essence, Dr. Ryan's gradual tiered approach based upon the data and the metrics that he outlined for us then. And my decision is going to be based on those data indicators and those metrics. It'll be based on the expert recommendations of the epidemiologists, not only from Oakland County but otherwise. I did have an opportunity to review some of that Brown University study that Dr. Ryan referenced in his presentation and about its very, very limited transmission of COVID within the school communities. What I'm not going to make my decision on is anecdotal evidence, the magazine articles and the books Dr. Ryan mentioned before. There's a lot of emotion out there in the community, and I get that. There's a little fear in the community, and I absolutely get that too. But I believe when you look objectively at all the data, it wholeheartedly supports the return to school recommendation as Dr. Ryan has outlined. Dr. Ryan, you have worked closely with Mrs. Horst and I the last several weeks, months actually, with your cabinet and others. To my community, I'll say I've been very, very impressed with your analytic approach, your data-driven analytic approach. I think it's the way we must make a decision, and based upon the data and analysis that you provided, I fully support this recommendation, and I have no real questions with regard to what you were recommending. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Need. We'll just go around in a circle then, or
I can go now.
Mrs. Catalina?
Yes, I first want to just say thank you to Dr. Ryan for all the details, all the data, the phone conversations, just everything that you have given me, as well as the other board, to just kind of rest assure my concerns of returning to a face-to-face. There, as Mr. Need had said, there is a lot of emotion going into this, and can you hear me now? Okay, so as Mr. Need had said, there is a lot of emotion, and I did have a lot of concerns, and with your information that you have shared with me and with the rest of the board, I feel that I can support this decision, you know, as long as I know that we have the data coming in every week, as it has in the past, in the future, to know that, you know, what are our numbers in the community, what are our numbers in the county, in North Oakland County, to just know that our students and staff are still staying safe.
Thank you, Ms. Catalina. And I'd even, just to echo on to your comment, I hope our community, as they hear a recommendation, it's definitely not set in stone or static. That as we monitor how things progress both inside our buildings and within our community and surrounding communities with respect to COVID, if that arrow is pointing the wrong direction, I will not wait for bad things to start to materialize in our school before I come to our Board of Education with that recommendation if we need to change stance. So I appreciate your comments.
Mr. Heyer?
Thank you, Mrs. Horst. I agree with Mr. Need 100% in all aspects. That's what, you know, in August when we had to make some difficult decisions as a board, you know, I was most concerned about those students that are clearly better off in school than their home situation. And it's difficult to identify those kids. I think getting back to school is important. I will say I wouldn't feel comfortable forcing somebody to come back to school in person, that, you know, for their particular family circumstance, it wasn't the best case. And that's why we have a virtual option, and that's why that is in place. It's been in place. So that's something I think I want to be clear, is that we have other options. The distance learning option, very clearly when we decided upon that at the beginning, was the option that was going to come back to school in person as soon as possible. And I appreciate, Dr. Ryan, you kind of living up to what we said, and that we truly did want to come back in person as soon as possible. We didn't set an arbitrary date. We didn't set some fake, you know, end of a marking period or semester, or evaluate sometime in the future. I mean, we're evaluating every day. And this is a point where it makes sense to phase in. And we phased in. And at every step of the way, I feel like you've worked in lockstep with the board. I know your administrative team has worked extremely hard evaluating every possible option, scenario, every stone that can be turned over and find some useful information. I feel like we've turned it over. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have a whole lot more stones to turn over and a whole lot more things to work out, but I think this plan will evolve. It'll come along. I think we're going to do our best. You know, this obviously is an unprecedented circumstance. You know, we have not been through this in any of our lifetimes, and hopefully we don't have to go through it ever again. But I know we're going to work as hard as we can possibly work to iron out all those details. You know, as a parent, you know, I get to make this decision for my kids as well as a whole bunch of other kids in our community. And I'm glad I have to live with that decision. It certainly makes me more accountable. If I had to make this decision for some kids somewhere else, it would be a heck of a lot easier. But when I have to make it for my kids and my neighbors and my community, it's a serious decision. And I think now is the right time. I think the phased approach is the right approach, and I'm 100% behind everything you've outlined, and I know that we will continue to work together as we refine that.
Mr. Heyer, I appreciate your comments, and you also mentioned that option between that having virtual and distance moving to in person. And following along with our community, there was concern that too many students were moving between programs. And I saw that on social media, and for those watching at home, they should know that as I look over to Mr. Lucido in the crowd, we had less, or roughly a 1% variance in our entire district population in terms of any type of mobility. And that we also have to be concerned of students, when we announced that we could be face-to-face, could come in from outside our school district. And I want to assure our parents that Mr. Lucido today was looking at adding in, and will be on the board recommendation if this passed, in our personnel that we're closely monitoring. We'll maintain those class sizes so that they're safe for everybody in school. And that's directed not only to our staff, but also to our families. And that we monitor this like we do any school year. We're just going to have to monitor it pretty much every day of the school year, unfortunately, for Mr. Lucido, but he is up to the challenge, and will continue to make those decisions and support those recommendations to me and to our board moving forward. So just wanted to use that opportunity to clarify something I know that was on some parts of our community's minds. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. You mentioned the finances, and we have a financial update coming up next. And as a board, I think it's important to recognize that we have not looked at this at, what's the cheapest option, or, what's the most expeditious option. We certainly haven't, overspent, what we don't need to overspend. But if we've needed to buy it to make it safe, if we've needed to hire somebody to make it work, like, we've done that. And as a board, we're 100% behind. Spend the money that we need to spend to do this as safe as possible. There's absolutely no financial component to the decisions that we're making, and we are being as frugal as we can be because we're stewards of our community's dollars. But I think that's an important point, that as we get into the financial update as our next item, we are absolutely not deciding this with dollars and cents. We're deciding on what's safe and what's best for our kids, and I think that's really an important point for us and our community. As an administration, I think you need to know the board is 100% behind that plan and that effort, and we do have some money in the bank to be able to do things like this. When we have a challenge that certainly we didn't anticipate this, we're able to overcome it.
Thank you, Mr. Heyer. Can we go to Mrs. Egan?
Hi, thank you. So I just have a couple comments. Certainly I would reiterate what Mr. Mead and Mr. Heyer said in terms of, thank you, Mrs. Forrest, for framing in this, back to school plan, and also thank you, Mr. Mead and Mrs. Forrest, because, our board leadership, we certainly appreciate all the extra time that it takes for you to put in, with Dr. Ryan and his administrative staff, what is really required to, keep the board perspective where needed, so thank you. Just a couple points I'll make. I believe we have better data with our health department, the home health department and epidemiology. It's great to know that we've had these measures in place, and now we all have some data that we can continue to monitor. And Dr. Ryan, thank you also. I know I sent some questions to you earlier today, or this weekend, about reaching out, and you were proactive. You had already done this, but speaking with our township supervisor to come up with some communication plan for our community, because we all know we can open the schools, but that doesn't mean they may stay open. And so I guess this is my my plea to those who are here tonight. Yeah, you take an interest in our board meeting, you're attending, you're listening. I think I can speak for our board in this manner, that we need your help. We need you to be speaking publicly to your neighbors, to your friends, anyone who is here in the community, even those who are visiting us, whether it's your relatives or your friends. We all have a different level of comfort, but we need your help. We need to understand that this is a shared collective agreement in our community to protect each other. And maybe you know someone who's had it and it wasn't that bad, but we also know some people who have had it and it has been very bad. Having said that, we also know that there are going to be some families who are fearful of coming back. Some are going to be ecstatic, that their kids will be coming back. But for those who are concerned, whether there's compromised immunity at home, or just, there's an elderly person in the family that's living with our our young students, we just need to be aware that, we're going to have to do our best to be flexible and work with those families. And I did get that assurance from Dr. Brian earlier today. So those are my comments, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of my colleagues.
Thank you, Mrs. Egan. Mrs. Crane?
Thank you, Mrs. Horst. I also want to just say thank you, especially to you, Dr. Ryan, and the leadership up here. I think everybody is very emotional, fearful, but I think the one thing that people have not doubted through all of this is the time, energy that you have all put into it, that we have all put into it, and I think that's been appreciated no matter what side of it you fall on. So I just wanted to say thank you to you. Thank you to the people who have been sending in emails and stopping us to talk about it, but have started those conversations with. Thank you. That's been very much appreciated. I do want to say that you actually touched on the one question I have written down here. I've been very appreciative of the fact that we, in this especially unprecedented time, have been able to finally have strong metrics that we were using to measure. I think anytime you can combat the emotional and the fear with numbers, and it helps. So when we were talking about Clarkston, the elementary school class sizes being the lowest they've ever been, that was one of my questions. Are we keeping a number in mind? Because I don't know how many people, I actually was not aware, and I'm glad you said this, of the low variance in people, the mobility between the virtual to the distance. So it was good to hear that. So that was really my only comment and question on that, was keeping the class sizes low since they're going to be full-time.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Crane. Mrs. McGinnis?
Thank you, President Horst and Dr. Ryan. Not unlike everybody else, I'm in awe of the work that our administration has done. In regards to what is the best thing for our students and our staff, back in August, I did not believe that we had a handle on the data or the tools our families needed to bring our kids face-to-face, or for our staff to be face-to-face. And I'm pleased to know that the Oakland County came to the table, as I like to say, and that we started working as one community in Oakland County for all our kids. We're in a place where we need to all find even the smallest of common threads that we have. We are in such a turmoil of so many things in our communities, in our state, and in our nation, that if we can just key in on those things that we have in common, we can start building the consensus that really is already there. We're just so polarized and separated, we haven't been able to see the trees in the woods. So what I like about this presentation and this next pivot, I like to call it too, I'm into a lot of pivots lately where I work also, is that it's an opportunity of choice. It's not making anybody do anything they don't want to do. They can continue to stay virtual, they can continue to stay remote, or they can choose to send their child face-to-face. I believe that our own individual choice is the thing that is most important to us, and that when we're able to make the choice that works for us, then we can all come together and build that consensus so that what we have in this community is best for everybody. It does mean we're going to have this really tight honor system, and I really, really appreciate the pleasant but heavy tone that Dr. Ryan used in his presentation about that it's going to take this village to keep these kids in the classroom. It is going to mean in your free personal time, you're going to have to make some choices that I hope in the back of your mind you're saying, is that going to be the right thing? It might be the right thing for me, but is it going to be the right thing for my community? So I really appreciate the people who are going to take the time to think about how their actions may impact our continuing to keep school face-to-face. Lastly, I really like Mr. Heyer's comment regarding it's not about dollars and cents. That is never in these 2 months of kind of these dialogues we've been having, have we ever once talked about, we can't, now, don't get me wrong, like he said, we are looking at how we're spending, but our decisions have never been made based on, do we have the dollars and cents to do it? It's always been about what is right for our students and what is right for our staff. So I wholeheartedly am behind this tiered approach, and I look forward to students being face-to-face where those families feel it is the right thing for them.
Ms. McGinnis, just a couple quick comments back to you. I want to appreciate your thought process on it, but looking at that community input and what it means for choice, I think we always have to remember that we offered our families, and Mr. Lucido and myself did our best in terms of looking and evaluating our staff and where they are in terms of risk factors to make sure wherever possible we could move them into that virtual format. But our teachers are really heroes to step up and to be able to work in any environment of a pandemic. And I want that to be clearly stated that they are putting it up front to make this happen in our cooperative effort. And knowing that to that community standpoint of your decision making, when it comes to keeping my and our people safe, I will not compromise if that rate starts to go between 6, 7, 8 per 10,000 and starts to climb. We are going to move our people and our students to make sure they're not put in that position. Although the data supports it's not spreading in school, I don't plan to be a research project for the rest of the year to find out. That might be a problem with our community at some point, but they need to hear loud and clear from me that we're staying 3 steps ahead to make sure that we're not having anything that could be in terms of any concentration by our health department otherwise in our schools. So I think that needs to be well stated and supported, again, that village mentality so that we can do this. So I want to applaud all our staff that is willing to take part, because we're going to need heroes in this. And that's what it's going to take, and I appreciate every last one of our students, or staff that's going to be able to support us on that. Secondly, I wanted to loop back to Ms. Crane, because you kind of got right into second comment related to class size. I want to be loud and clear and transparent that I was able, with the money that we had, the resources, to provide that in elementary. Our secondary class sizes are very typical of any other year that we would have, and it needs to be for every secondary teacher that's listening in that has to know that that absolutely positively went into my thinking for the hybrid. Having half the students of the regular class makes a difference. I couldn't do it based on facility size and everything to make that extraordinary low class size in our secondary that matched, and that will also go into thinking in my recommendation as we move forward. It should also be known in looking and reflecting that our elementary students are not as equipped to deal with the independent learning that involves if we were in a distance format, and I think that our secondary students have a lot higher tolerance to be successful over time in that. Again, plays into my thinking to try to get ahead by providing us that chance to cohort with those smaller class sizes. And you'll see that kind of continue to pan out, and if it changes over the weeks, we're going to keep working on that. But I need to be 100% convinced on our move into that secondary, on how it's working, and that will come in the advisement of the next steps if we need to step back into distance or bring students fully back in. But read loud and clear. The best way to stay ahead of this infection and this pandemic is not to wait and see what happens. You make smart decisions based on the rates and what's going on in yours and surrounding concentric rings around your community. And when it starts to head in a direction that is not positive, you move before it becomes a problem. So my plan would be to continue to do that. I just don't want our community to have any type of idea that, again, this is a week to week, so it's not like you suddenly go from being good to being bad. That's not realistic of how this works. What could happen is in a period of span of 3 or 4 weeks, we could head in a bad direction. At the end of that 3 and 4 weeks, we will be moving out of what I consider harm's way with the cooperation. Because as I said again, this relies on experts that are in epidemiology that are allowing to be heard and being able to cooperate with us, which I also heard over there as far as them coming to the table. So I think your 2 comments kind of wound together. But make no mistake, in any respect, when it comes to pandemic, our teachers are heroes who come back into that. So are our parapros, our bus drivers, our administrators, and every support staff member that's willing to support the students of this community. They know in their hearts that our students need those connections, and if we can do it in a way that can be safe and mitigate those potential risks as much as possible, I know so many of our teachers have that feeling to support kids and where their hearts are, and I think that our families, our community, and everybody needs to be able to recognize those individuals and what they're willing to do for the children of this community. And that was going to be honestly my end statement after everybody had, but I was so kind of like, I guess, jolted by your comments that I felt the need to put in part of my end statement right there, and so thank you.
Dr. Ryan, I'll just add a couple of things before we turn the microphone over to our public. We have several who would like to address this evening. I think we had a pretty rough night on August 10th. We were here for almost 6 hours. We debated for several hours. We heard public comment for several hours. And I think about how far we've come since then in terms of just knowledge. I'd say knowledge and confidence, right? In terms of just what we know and how we've come to know it. It's funny because I think the couple of concerns that I voiced back then, I think maybe are still sort of on my mind now, one being continuity of learning. And I don't know that has necessarily gone away, but it certainly didn't materialize looking at other districts in the way that I thought it might. And so I feel a lot more confident now about our direction than I certainly did, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. So I'm so pleased to have taken that pause with you and watched and waited and seen what others did. And I think only now, and the county health department has been such a tremendous partner to us to the point that they're now even having bi-monthly meetings with school board presidents wanting to bring us along in this very complicated understanding of the data and what it means. That I don't think I really didn't know what I didn't know until now that they're trying to educate me on it. So we have come so far in terms of just being able to wrap our arms around the very localized information that we need to ensure that we are ready for this next step. And really, almost from the moment we took that vote on August 10th, our charge to you was, now get us back to face-to-face. I mean, that really was our charge. And I think you spoke very publicly, we all spoke very, very publicly about that being our ultimate goal. And then asking you for some very concrete steps and metrics on how to get there. And so I certainly appreciate the very thoughtful and the very pragmatic approach that you've taken to do that. I look at this and I think of this really being the next step in the phased or the tiered approach. And I absolutely appreciate every cautionary moment that you have given us tonight. And I think you want all of us to hear it. I want all of us to hear it. I want our community to hear it as well. That should we vote to move forward with this recommendation here this evening, that it could just be, as Mrs. McGinnis said, one pivot in a series of pivots. So those are just the things that are on my mind as I would now like to turn this over to our community, and then we'll see if any sort of themes or sort of prevailing questions come out that we might want to address one more time. So we have a list here in front of us. Members of the public, I will remind you that our format is to receive or hear public comment. It is not to respond to or address questions, and I'm sorry for that, but that is the format of our business meeting. I'll remind you we do have an active email address for those of you who are seeking answers to very specific or operational questions, and that is fall2020@clarkston.k12.mi.us. I'm sorry, we are not trying to dismiss or minimize the operational concerns you have or the concerns that are very important to you or your family situation. But what I can tell you, having worked very closely now for hours and hours during the week with Dr. Ryan and this administration, is I promise you that they have thought of and are actively working on every concern that you've raised, everything that you've emailed me about in the last week, everything that I've seen on social media, and those answers will be forthcoming one way or the other, however we vote tonight. So rest assured, those operational concerns are on their mind. They are working their way through them. They have been working their way through them. This is not the format for us to be able to engage in that kind of back and forth. So that said, let's go ahead and move on to public comment. Up first is Leanne Steele. And Ms. Steele is, there you are. You have 2 minutes. We're happy to hear from you.
All right, good, thank you. Just wanted to thank the board for, allowing the kids and considering and hopefully voting for them to go back in person. I know I have 3 elementary school aged kids and they are super excited. So thank you for that. I did notice on the calendar, which I know you guys are going to be approving, I think later in the agenda, the October 23rd and 25th were listed as, I think, teacher open days. So just looking for clarity on those 2 days, and maybe that will come out, but I was unsure if they would be in the classroom on those days or not. And then I know this will come out, and I can send an email to the fall 2020 email address, but I'm looking for information on mask breaks, and then how will cases be handled, in particular, like I have 3 kids, so if one kid gets sick, do all my kids have to stay home, and then how will they continue their learning? And when I say sick, not with COVID, but with something that could be suspected as COVID that turns out not to be. And appreciate the smaller class sizes. Wished it was something that we could continue even post-COVID. So thank you.
All right, thank you so very much. All right, I was just reminded that I'm supposed to ask you to state your name and your address. I think we've gotten away from that a little bit here in the virtual format, but if you would please state your name and address, and then you have 2 minutes. Sorry about that. Thank you for keeping me honest and above board. Okay, up next we have Zach. If you will please state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
I want to express my serious concern for the legitimacy of our government and the safety of myself and my community. Firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing. Here in Michigan, we continue to see hundreds of new cases each day and a continued rise in the 7-day average of new cases. I called Governor Whitmer's office today and spent an hour waiting to ask 3 basic questions in light of the school district's plans. Is the virus contained in Michigan? If not, what is the strategy for containment? And is there an infrastructure in place to effectively combat the spread of COVID-19? And is containment still central to the public health strategy in Michigan? The governor's office was instructed to tell me and other concerned neighbors that the state was doing everything it could, but could not directly answer any of my basic questions. I have called my federal and state legislators' offices, along with the governor's office today, and no one has a concrete plan that can be explained to a concerned citizen. Containment remains the only rational public health strategy going forward. What number of sick children, staff, and faculty can the board and Clarkston tolerate before we change course? What can the Board of Education do to use its relationships with federal and state legislators, including Alyssa Slotkin, Andrea Schroeder, and Rosemary Baer, to pressure people above them to get a national strategy for containing this deadly virus? Will the Board of Education commit to taking a leadership position in our community to demand greater transparency in our fight and get the resources necessary for our children and our future leaders? I implore the board not to send children back into schools violating basic distancing rules, and to engage with parents, students, faculty, staff, and community members like myself to collectively demand that our government do everything they can to escalate our response to containing and eliminating the risk of COVID-19 so we can safely send kids back to school and they can learn and grow in a community that does everything it can to protect the most vulnerable, our children. The solution is political and it is not individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Right, next we have Joyce Kaufman. You'll please state your name and address, and you have approximately 2 minutes. Ms. Kaufman, if you'll unmute on your end, we are ready to hear from you. Joyce, we'll move on to JB, and we'll come back and try you again in just a moment. Okay. JB, we are ready to hear from you. Please state your name and your address, and you have approximately 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Bramer. I live on Horseshoe Circle here in Clarkston. And I want to circle back to something that Dr. Ryan had said about the learning options. About a month and a half ago, like you had said, we had talked about the options for returning to school, the virtual learning, the distance learning, with the caveat of if you choose virtual, you may return back to school at the beginning of the next semester. Now, per what has been said on social media, several parents have called or have claimed they've called the schools, particularly parents of younger students, K through 4th, 5th grade, with the difficulty of the virtual program, and they've been allowed to switch back to the distance learning. I don't know if that's multiple parents creating falsehoods online, or if that's truly the case. We've seen nothing from the school saying, hey, if this isn't working for you, we can switch you back. So I know you can't answer questions in this, so I would respectfully request maybe an email from Dr. Ryan or somebody letting us know if we are having problems. As a parent of 2 young kids who do have problems with the virtual learning, if we do switch back into the in-person school, is that still the case that some were allowed to switch and now they can go back, and the rest of us that didn't call and complain are stuck until January, or how exactly that works? So if there could be some sort of communication on that, like I said, I know you can't answer that tonight, but maybe in the near future, that would be greatly appreciated.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments. Next, we have Charles Cederman. All right, Mr. Cederman.
Yes, thank you. So this is Charles Cederman. I live over in Hidden Acres. And, I understand that, listening to the conversation that you're focused tonight on the health aspects of returning, and you indicate the logistics will be handled separately. And that's all well and good, but at what point will those be handled between now and Monday, as far as having open forum? Because truthfully, the hybrid, I don't believe is going to work very well unless I better understand it, because based on assumptions I would have without clarity, I don't believe the hybrid is a good choice. You're either in or you're out. So my question is, at what point will it be addressed between now and Monday in the public forum?
Right.
Are you speaking? Because I can't hear you.
Yep. Thank you so much for your comments.
I didn't hear the response. When will it be addressed? I'm sorry. Did she mute me? Hello?
All right. Up next, we have, it just says Becky. Becky, we can hear you. You now have 2 minutes. Thank you.
I think I accidentally raised my hand. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you so much for attending the meeting tonight. Up next, Tyra Blanks. Great.
Hi, my name is
We can hear
Tyra.
you. Great. Please state your name and address, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Tyra Blanks, and I live on Langle Drive in Deer Lake Farms in Clarkston. My concern is I appreciate all of the work that Dr. Ryan has put into communicating, discussing All the logistics, the analysis, just everything is just great and wonderfully well put together, more than what I've heard or seen in, let's say, some of the other districts and things in the summer. However, I am concerned about the support for our children of color, okay? Because health-wise, that is a major issue right now, but also we have a lot of social justice issues that are just as major. There are a lot of protests, as there was a protest here in Clarkston over the summer. That protest was put on by, I believe, a past student of Clarkston. And I'm just wondering what type of, liaison or what we're going to do. I know you're not allowed to answer questions at this moment, but that is something that, I think we need to be speaking about, is how are we going to protect their mental state going to school, some of the things that they have seen on social media, some of their experiences. My 8th grader does not want to attend school because he has experienced racial slurs on social media with people that he attended school with just this last spring. I was called a sheep by a neighbor for wearing a mask. So there's so many things that are going on in our world and even in our small town of Clarkston. And so I am very concerned about the mental state of our children of color who may not want to attend school regardless of the health issue, because to them, the health issue isn't as major as how they feel when they're there. We have some great teachers, great educators here in the school, but when it comes to dealing with real issues of our children of color, that's a very small group of people who are willing to work. I have worked with Dr. Ryan and I've appreciated all the help that I've received from him, but we don't have a lot of people that are there. And so that's a large concern. I do plan to send continuous emails until I get an answer for that and how we plan to bridge that gap moving forward, since most of you all have decided to open the schools up.
Right. Thank you so much for your comments tonight. Next, we have Rebecca Roszewski. Very good. All right.
I want to
state your name
apologize
and
for
address,
early.
and we've got about 2 minutes.
I raised my hand a little bit early. I want to thank you for all of the hard work you've all done. It's so appreciated. I too understand that you can't answer my specific question tonight, but just hope that I find it in the upcoming communications. My son is in high school doing the IB program, so there really isn't a choice for virtual. So I'm hoping with the hybrid that if I choose to keep him at home, he can still continue his studies with the teachers, I'm assuming, teaching virtually and in person. So I hope to see that included in the operational information. And again, thank you very, very much for all of your hard work.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments. Next, we have Lisa Bohr. All right, great. You're unmuted. We have state your name and address, please, and you have 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Bohr. I live in Windstone Park. While I'm a proponent of transitioning back to face-to-face school, I have some concerns about the particular hybrid model which is being proposed this evening. I'm a parent of 2 secondary students, and I think our teachers have done a tremendous job of teaching via distance learning. However, I cannot imagine asking teachers to teach to half a class that is in person while the other half is logged in online. Juggling the needs of both students in this environment is a completely new beast. It took at least 12 minutes to get tonight's meeting started with both in-person and off-site attendees. And I asked the board to imagine what it would be like instructing geometry with half the students in person and the other half online. I'm very curious to know if the proposed transition this evening has the support of faculty, because their commitment is critical to its success. Another additional item of concern is classroom sizes. As you all well know, our district has historically been very committed to maintaining low classroom sizes. But at some point, I would like to know a specific number of how we define small classroom sizes, because at the secondary level, I'm hearing of classes with 25 to 30 students. I've heard of elementary school classes that have 27, 28 students, and this is not small in my mind. The additional movements of students who are not happy with the virtual program, which they did commit to for one semester, further increases this classroom sizes and the staffing requirements for face-to-face. And I did see in the packet that Mr. Lucido has some significant staffing changes that are required. So those are of concern for not only the quantity, but also the quality of the staffing that is being fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments tonight. Next up, we have Brittany L. Oh, looks like I lost Brittany. Am I holding on a minute?
Brittany just needs to unmute and we'll be able to hear you.
All right, Brittany, if you can unmute so we can hear you.
I raised my hand by accident.
Oh, okay. Thanks for coming tonight. Move on to Brandy Hamilton. Brandy, if you'll unmute.
Hello?
Hi there, we can hear you. State your name and address, please, and you'll have 2 minutes.
Brandy Hamilton on Old Oaks. I would just like to say thank you to everyone for all the hard work in making this work. And I truly believe that we can get back to school in person, that we can make it work. And thank you.
All right, thank you so much for your comments. And next, we have Braylon. Braylon, if you'll state your full name for me, please, and your address, and you'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Braylon. I'm a 4th grader at Independence Elementary. Thank you for your hard work. I would like you to consider keeping distant learning because I don't want to wear a mask all day. Also, I am doing good at it and my classmates are doing good too. Third, I think it is also the safest. We can't stay 6 feet apart like you are right now. That means that if one of my classmates has COVID-19, the whole class can get it. That is why we should stay distant. Thank you.
Thank you, Braylon. I'm really proud of you for coming to speak to us tonight. You did a great job. Okay. Uh-oh, I'm trying to leave the meeting. No, I'm not. I just wanted to offer any trustees one more opportunity now that we've heard some, public comment, comments from our public. And the one thing that came up a few times that frankly was kind of a strange word when I first heard it as well, because in the summer, I think 6 weeks ago, it was a word we weren't considering, was hybrid. So I don't know if Dr. Ryan, you wanted to maybe take a moment and address or just reiterate, because I think you did address it, but maybe reiterate why this is an appropriate measure for right now for the secondary level, and how it maybe differs a little, I think, than what maybe we've heard in the past, and what that approach was in the summer that other districts maybe have embraced.
Looking at our proposal for hybrid and some of the differences that it has compared to some other districts that gave me pause was looking at trying to get 5 days of instruction from a 5-day week is incredibly important for our students to be able to keep progressing learning. Where I think the difference in Clarkston is that we want to be able to trust our teachers to take those 5 days with students in class and the students that are also virtual to be creative based on their curriculum, based on the content that they're trying to deliver, and looking at their own expertise to be able to structure that time so that students stay engaged over that week. And I've been disappointed in some of my conversations with my colleagues who have engaged in a hybrid to where it was on Monday, they teach a lesson for half the class. On Tuesday, they teach the same lesson to the other half of the class. That's not what I'm hearing back from our feedback from Ms. Mahoney and the feedback that she and I have received from teachers, secondary teachers across this district. To comment directly to Ms. Boer's comment, our teachers are saying trust them. Do things that are going to keep us safe. Trust us as professionals that with given flexibility, that we will continue to educate this community's children, and we'll do it in a safe way. And Mr. Ryan, or Dr. Ryan, I've heard back from them, was pleased that we can trust you to continue to monitor, making sure that things are not creeping up in our community, and that we count on you and the relationships we have with you, that you make the right decisions moving forward. So looking at it as a hybrid, as I said in August when I looked at a straight hybrid of doing some sort of half-paced instruction, I was very against it. And I was also very concerned unless it was going to be brought, like that assurance from our teachers, which another thing I should tell you from the teachers I spoke to in secondary, the feedback was, have we let you down yet when it comes to bringing our level of professionalism and getting it down in the secondary? And I would say absolutely not. They've been nothing short of inspiring. And I believe that our teachers will carry this through, whether it lasts a couple weeks and we're able to safely transition to have more students back, or we have to stay in longer. I know our teachers will continue to evaluate it with me. They will let me know. They have no fear in picking up the phone or emailing me, and I can tell you to a person. They either get a personal direct meeting with me, out to their building, or a return email or a phone call to make sure that I understand their viewpoints. And that goes along with Mr. Lucido and Ms. Mahoney as well. Collectively, we feel like our decisions are stronger by getting that input. And this process of getting input just didn't start last 2 weeks or yesterday. It started way back in the spring and through the summer as we worked. We put an all call out to our staff to be involved in task forces. They shared with their concerns of hybrids and other type of formats all along this journey. And I think we're just lucky, myself personally and professionally being in Clarkston going on 25 years this next month, I think is my official 25-year mark at the end of October, of the relationships that I've built over those 25 years with our community and with our teachers, to know that there's a level of trust that we need to keep moving forward together. So I would say, you know, that respect to hybrid and the program of all, that's got to be the front of our minds. And I just want to say again how much I appreciate our teachers and everything they do, including all counselors and social workers and every one of the Clarkston team, because the attitude has been all hands on deck to help us get there. So I just hope that I can continue to have our board support and our community support. I know no matter what direction you head, it's never popular. I've never felt like my decision making through this process has hinged on anything less to know that I have 2 children in Clarkston schools right now. I care deeply about my children and my colleagues, and that I'm doing the best I can to evaluate direct data in a smart and thoughtful way that's going to kind of continue to see us through this crisis. And we can rest assured this week that our families will be receiving a ton of more information in terms of toolkits and information. And that's just one more reason, because of the hybrid being different than something normal, that I pushed the recommendation another week so that we had a full couple weeks in addition for us to be able to answer family questions and really design that time. In that time, you know where the chief communication is going to come from to our families and our kids? It's from our teachers. They're going to be able, as they process through, to help in that transition. And as we open our doors for students that are new to buildings to be able to visit and get comfortable, at least be able to see it, it's a different year. We've never done this before. But we're gonna keep working at it, and I'm going to do my best to try to push and lead and support our organization in every way that I can.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I know there was one gentleman, I wrote JB, and I know Mrs. McLean would have captured a name for me, but asked very specifically about some follow-up based on some rumors that were out on social media or some information that had been shared on social media. So would you please follow up on that? And you don't have to do it right now, but I think, you know, just had asked about a follow-up via email. That
just briefly, this is, I already stated once earlier in the meeting, probably about an hour ago, I don't know if people tune in to turn out, is that There are circumstances, family circumstances or otherwise, that we need to address. We treat everybody in a way that we try to process their problems. We also simultaneously have to staff the district in a way that makes sense so we can provide services. That when we did have any transition, I'm not saying there was zero, I'm saying that there was a 1% variance on the entire student population and movement through this time. I also shared that my bigger concern is students just re-enrolling in Clarkston schools from private and surrounding districts and coming in. I said also that regardless of where they come from and how they occur, when I look at my elementary cohorts, whatever teachers I need to add in to maintain what I consider low class size right now is between 18 and 21. K-5, to me that is good low class size. Normally we'd have our kindergarten in ranges of high teens in that neighborhood, and then have a transition all the way up to 5th grade, which in a normal year could be as high as 27 or 28 plus. You know, that wouldn't be unknown. But this year, K-5, we're doing our best to keep, and I'll look over to Mr. Lucido for support in terms, we're trying to keep universally, when people talk about a metric or a number, to me, it's not perfect because we have limitations on classrooms and everything else, but looking at that 20 range has been my goal through COVID. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any further comments, questions, feedback? Mrs. Crane.
I just wanted to take a quick second. I know we don't particularly respond to people, but Ms. Blanks brought up a very good point about our students of color, and I just wanted to assure her that in this time of COVID, sometimes that feels like that's the only thing we're talking about, and it's not. I think our administration, we've always known that with especially recent events, it's been on all of our minds, and we have talked about it. Mrs. McGinnis and I, we just joined a group of Oakland County. There is 2 people from most districts. We are on a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee, and we've been committed to talking as a group in Oakland County and bringing ideas and trying to combat that. And it is on our minds. It may not be talked about publicly every day, but it is something that we are talking about. We just voted last board meeting to bring in better books to deal with these subjects. So I just wanted to let her know that we appreciate her comments, her emails, and it is something that we are all thinking about.
And even follow up, the conversation of this banks and looking at our learning resources was a big item, and I had worked with Ms. Mahoney and our subject area coordinators to start to look to make sure that we had a balanced approach, that everybody's represented at some point, that can find reading material that is diverse. So, work in progress. Thank you.
Last call for questions, feedback on the topic of the recommendation to return to face-to-face learning. Okay, we'll move on to item 5.2, presentation item, our financial analysis. Should I turn that back over to Dr. Ryan, or should we go straight to Mr. Lucido?
Yep. Ms. Rogers and Mr. Lucido will be able to give us kind of an update, understanding that this year, as you see the analysis of what we're receiving financially, we have been given, with restrictions, financial support in a limited way from the federal government, and this past week from the state, of one-time COVID supports that we are utilizing and converting into our expenditures that are around the teaching positions and other supplies that we have talked about for cleaning and otherwise and low class size. And that's kind of our strategy to utilize those supports right now. But Ms. Rogers, and with any feedback from Mr. Lucido, can provide us with the insights, kind of an update of where we are at a point in time.
Are we ready?
Yep, we're ready to hear from you. Thank you, Ms. Rogers.
Yep. This is the 2020-21. I did a financial analysis as a lot. This is the most I think has ever changed this quickly in a school year from the budget that we approved in June. But we knew when we were approving the budget in June that a lot was going to happen. There was just so much revenue we didn't know about. And here, the first slide, I'm going to talk about all the COVID funding streams, which are all federal funding that have come in. These have all majority of these have come in, except for the CARES federal funding is in the budget. The other items have come in. We knew about them and they came in, they came in since the June budget. We thought they might be coming, but we didn't know for sure. The first one is the big one. It's the 11P funding, and it's $350 COVID relief funding. It's right now on our books is about 2.9 million. There's still a lot of guidance coming out on this funding, and it does have to be spent by December 31st, the revenue piece. But basically right now, our plan is to use it on summer payroll for development, training, and implementation of distance and virtual learning. The majority of that will be used for that. And that is one of the items that they say it is allowed to be used for, is developing any kind of distance or virtual learning. The 103.2 district COVID cost is $105,000 that we've also received a federal funding, and we're going to be using this to purchase PPE supplies. The CARES federal funding, which was $178,000 that we had to apply for, and it has been approved in the last couple of weeks. It was approved, the application, and we're going to be using that for 2 FTE and North Ashtabal teachers, and then 1 aide. It's actually, I put North Ashtabal, but I think it's changed since then. It'll be at Pine Knob. So, and then also some supplies at North Ashtabal. And then I have applied for FEMA funding. That process, I have no idea how long it's going to take or if we're going to receive it. It's something that schools have never tried for before. But under the circumstances of an emergency situation we're in, we were encouraged to at least try. So I did the application, and my understanding is if any of the things I applied for, if they do decide to fund it, they fund it at a 75% reimbursement. And what I applied for was the one-to-one technology. I've applied for some PPE supplies, to hotspots, some stipends, and then I also applied for the ECC revenue losses. The child care relief, we've received $41,400 so far. And this will go into the early childhood fund to help cover the closing of ECC during April, May, and June. We will continue to apply for this monthly. The next slide, the state aid budget. That one is hot off the press, as you probably heard. About last Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they started coming out with information about the 2020 state aid budget. We unfortunately had to approve a June budget without this known. The budget does need to be implemented by October 1st for the state level. We are a quarter into our school year and we're just getting the information. But it is good news. It's a lot better news than what we were told last May. Due to the way the revenue consensus came in August, it came in stating that the summer spending, the summer collection of taxes was all, and revenue was just up a lot more than they were thinking it was going to be in May. So because of that, they have given us a stable, and they even have had put in a one-time increase per pupil, which we weren't expecting. And that is going to equivalent to about $65 per person, the one time. And then bottom line, I guess you could say we received the same foundation as last year if they wouldn't have given us the 175 proration. So we're going to be back at the 8,111 that we were at last year without that end of the year proration that we received in August. So to summarize how we ended up with our revenue then is the foundation allowance. We have in our budget, we have it at $7,711 right now. That's what the board approved in June, which was a $400 proration. Because back in May, we were being told it was going to be a $650 to $750 proration. The board went with the $400. So that's what we have in our budget. But the state aid foundation budget, when it gets signed by the governor, which it has not, by my understanding, been signed yet, but she's supposed to sign it before October 1st, it will be stable. So I'll be able to increase the budget to 8,111, which increases our budget revenue 2,839,000 for that piece. There is the one-time that I mentioned. There's going to be a one-time foundation allowance increase of $65 approximately per pupil. So that would be approximately $550,000 for this school year. That we could increase the budget. I have been decreasing some local revenue in athletics. I increased that just over 200,000. Just won't, with the COVID continuing, and we're still running into some issues with our community ed, our athletics, our rentals. We're still running into a little bit of issues there. And then just the increase of stuff that we're getting from ISD and other schools, that's just 35,000. And then, as I talked about in the first slide, all this 2021 federal funding, that's all one-time funding, but that's equivalent to $3.1 million to increase the budget. This increases the 2020-21 budget by $6.3 million, all these revenues. And then our expenditures have also been changing a lot with us switching to a more of the virtual. We've implemented a virtual, Clarkston virtual, that was not in the June budget. And we've had several families go to that program, and we've moved a lot of our staff over to that program. So as of right now, we're looking at just under 4 million brick and mortar staffing reduction. We're also going to have about 375,000 savings and layoffs because we didn't start school on September 8th. The Clarkston virtual, all the expenses and staffing that we have brought over for Clarkston virtual that is not in the budget is just under 6 million. The virtual academies, which is the academy that we started last year, that has just over 900,000 more expenses from what I could tell. Shared service, just over $1 million. And then the COVID supply purchases, at this point I have in the budget to add another 105,000 to that, which is going to be covered by that federal funding. That brings our expenditure changes to $3.68 million at this point from the budget that was approved in June. Also, our early childhood is running into losses again this year. That was not predicted in any of the early childhood fund budgets that was passed in June, or the general fund. So the general fund is going to lose about 312,000 because we were having early childhood transfer 62,000 over to us, and so I'm going to have to take that transfer away, and then I'm looking at maybe we might need to transfer another 250,000, maybe potentially more, but we're looking at some probably heavy losses again in early childhood, and we're going to have to transfer money over to them because they can't have a negative fund balance. The approved budget deficit that was approved in June by the board was 861,000 negative. It was a deficit. With the revenue changes I talked about in the revenue slide of 6.3 million and the expected expenditure changes at this point of 3.683 million being up, that leaves us with an estimated surplus as of 9/24 when I reviewed all this of 1.46 million. So that is quite the swing from the 861, but a lot of the revenue, like I said, has come in that we didn't know was coming in back in June when the board approved it. The final things I just want you to think about, I know that sounds really, really good. It is great. We've got great news with the state, got great news with this federal funding that helping us out, but I just want us to think throughout this school year, there's still going to be many challenges, unknowns. We don't know if there's going to be any additional executive orders. Remember the federal funding, it is additional funding, but with that funding is also additional guidelines, mandates, and or restrictions. We're still working on finalizing the student pupil counts, so that could be a change in the budget that we have not implemented yet. And this is a large amount of one-time funding in the budget right now. even though we're looking at a 1.46 surplus right now, and that could change between now and when I do the amended budget in the winter. But of that, remember, one-time funding is 3.65 million. There is probably going to be some unanticipated expenditures since we're in a time that we've never been in before. We're also in an election year, and we're just not sure right now what is the new normal. So, I don't know if I have any questions. That's the update that we are at right now.
All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Rogers. Trustees, are there any questions for Mrs. Rogers on the financial update? Very nice of the legislature to give us some good news and updated news ahead of the presentation. All right. Thank you very much. We will move on to action items, and item 6.1 is approval of the recommendation regarding our return to school plan. May I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the recommendation regarding returning to in-person instruction beginning the week of October 5th, 2020, as presented.
Support. Is there any additional discussion or questions? Mrs. McLean, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Catalina?
Yes.
Mrs. Crane?
Yes.
Mr. Need?
Yes.
Mr. Heyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Egan?
Yes.
Mrs. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mrs. Horst?
Yes. The motion carries. Item 6.2 is approval of personnel changes. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the personnel changes listed on the attached sheets as presented.
Support.
Since there were some late additions to this and they were contingent upon approval of 6.1, Mr. Lucido, could you just please give us a quick overview of what those additions are and how they be used now that we have approved a return to school? And if all trustees, including me, could mute for just a moment.
The additional positions that we're requesting this evening due to our return to face-to-face is a first grade section at Independence Elementary, a first grade section at Pine Knob Elementary, a fourth grade section at Bailey Lake Elementary, and a second grade section at Clarkston Elementary.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Lucido regarding the personnel report? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.3 is approval of the amended 2020-2021 calendar. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the 2020-21 calendar amendment as presented.
Support.
Mr. Lucido, there was a question about October 23rd raised earlier. Could you clarify that for me, please, just so I'm clear?
Yes, I certainly can. October 23rd and November 25th for the AM portion of the day, they were non-instructional days. With the new changes to people accounting and they're calling pandemic learning, after we had our calendar set, we were short 2 teacher days, so we had to add 2 days where teachers had to be available to students. So we will have teacher office hours on October 23rd and November 25th in the AM. So this will be an increase in services provided to our students, but it will not change the number of instructional days that they're required to support. And just with the approval of the return to face-to-face instruction, I do want to clarify there was 2 parts of Mr. Ryan's presentation that are going to affect the calendar in addition to these changes that will be part of this. So 9:30 is now going to become teacher office hours in the morning, and then the afternoon will be flex time for teachers to prepare for our return to at the physical locations. So that will be a non-instructional day for students on 9:30. And then 10:21 will now become a half-day instruction in the AM, and then PM will be parent-teacher conferences. I just wanted to clarify, those are the originally proposed changes to the calendar, and the new changes based off the approval of the return to face-to-face.
Okay, great. So is it worth,
I just got a text message that it's, the audience cannot hear him speaking.
I was just going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe a quick recap from one of you, that I think it's that microphone, that they are getting a lot of feedback from that
oh, okay.
microphone.
Could you kill that, make sure that microphone is turned off and we can recap that for you? Or if you would like to come up here. Oh, that'll work just fine. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate that. Our nice watchdog audience members, we appreciate that. Mr. Lucido will recap that for you.
So thank you very much. So just to recap and answer the community members' question, on October 23rd and November 25th, those were non-student days. With the new changes that they had to the pupil accounting and the pandemic learning, we were short 2 days in which teachers were available to students. So those remain non-instructional days, but now October 23rd for the full day and November 25th in the AM will now become teacher office hours times. That's where students can schedule time to meet with teachers. And then I did clarify beyond that with the approval to the face-to-face instruction, September 30th will now be teacher office hours in the AM, and then teachers flex time in the afternoon, which is time we're going to allow to get to prepare for face-to-face instruction in our physical locations. And also 10/21 is going to be instruction in the AM, and then parent-teacher conferences in the afternoon.
Okay. Thank you so much. So Mrs. Mahoney, take note. If we need you to use a microphone, you're going to have to come kick one of us out of our seats. We'll figure that out. Okay. Any other questions from board members regarding the calendar? Mrs. Egan, I saw your text. Did you get that now once we used a regular microphone? Okay. Thank you so much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 6.4 is approval of purchase of the iReady assessment tool. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the purchase of the iReady assessment tool in the amount of $68,720 as presented.
Support.
Are there any questions or discussion? This was brought up as part of our extended learning plan, correct? We discussed this 2 weeks ago at our last board meeting. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. And item 6.5 is approval of the COVID-19 extended learning plan. May I have a motion, please?
I move the Board of Education approves the district's extended COVID-19 learning plan as presented.
Support.
Any questions or discussion? It was discussed at length at our most recent board meeting, but Mrs. Mahoney is here and can certainly address any follow-up questions from trustees.
I think it's worth pointing out that this is a state requirement, and we're checking a box by approving this, that our plans are much more comprehensive and detailed and student-focused.
It's a bipartisan state requirement, right? But it's still a box checker. I agree with you, Mr. Heyer. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll move on to report items. Number 7. 7.1 is our monthly financial report. And we will turn it back over to Ms. Rogers. All right, Mrs. Rogers, it's on our screens now, and we are ready for you.
The board financial update is our annual bringing of the summer finances of what happened during the months of June, August, and June, July, and August. Basically, you were given the check registers and the expenditures for those 3 months. And then this slide is the where we are at for the first 2 months of the 2020-21 fiscal year. The budget to actuals is 5%. We've received local revenue of just under 9%. We don't start receiving our 9%. That's basically our tax collection. The state revenue is only at 1% because we don't start receiving our state revenue until October 20th. And the federal revenue is at 121%, and that would be due to that $3 million of COVID federal funding that I spoke of, the 11P and the 103 funding. We have already received that funding, so then but we didn't budget for it, so it makes it look like we're way off there. And then we haven't received anything yet from any other schools or the ISD. The budget to actual expenditures is also just over 5%. Instructional expenditures is just under 6%, and then the operations is 12%. With the August 31st, 2020 fund equity ending at approximately $11.1 million, and the June 30th, 2020 unaudited fund equity is $10.45 million, and we will be in a month. The auditors will be here, and then we will have audited numbers at that point. So do I have any questions about any of the information that you received in your packet on the summer months?
Trustees, any questions on our summer financials? Thank you so much, Ms. Rogers. Appreciate you being here virtually and going over our finances with us. Item 8 is discussion items. There are none this evening. Item 9 is citizen comments. Citizens are welcome to address the board on any topic at this point on tonight's agenda. So we'll pause for a moment and let me return to my Zoom screen. And we will go through our process one more time. For those attending the meeting this evening, if there is anything you wish to share with the board or address the board on, now is the time. And I'll give you just a moment to click on the participants button in the raise hand feature. And as we did before, we will call on you. You'll state your name and address, and you'll have approximately 2 minutes to address the board. Right now I see one citizen who would like to address the board. Heather Dost. No?
Hi.
Oh, okay, very
My
good.
name is Heather Dost. I'm an employee of the district and a PTA board member at PKE. I have 3 children in the virtual program. I'd really like to see the district leadership and direction to include this year's virtual students in their home school yearbook with their class. It's an easy thing to do to boost mental well-being of students. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for your comments. Right, at this time, I don't see anyone else who wishes to address the board. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight's meeting. Item 10 is information items. So item 10.1 is the recommended and now approved return to in-person instruction for students, which will begin the week of October 5th, 2020. And as Dr. Ryan said, our parents and our staff can look forward to that operational toolkit toward the end of the week. Our next board meeting will be Monday, October 12th at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom, where we will see what challenges await us, but we will get there with, I believe, a Zoom link for public participation pending any additional executive orders. Item 11 is adjournment. May I have a motion, please? I move to
I move
adjourn.
to adjourn.
I support.
Thank you, Mr. Need. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good night.